I go over to Dusty's little apartment in Pasadena one time, and he says, hey, can you loan me some money? Yeah. My wife was working. I wasn't working, but my wife was working. So
We both lived
I said, how much you need? He said, I don't know, $5 or whatever. And
more than that.
So I go into his kitchen, and he has these mason jars up on a ledge. And one of them says rent, one of them says entertainment, one says books, one says about 5 of them.
If you grew up in a family that taught the traditional methods of budgeting and saving, this might be a familiar picture. Mason jars, each labeled with the financial needs of that month. This old-fashioned budgeting would use some container that would be systematically filled with cash at the beginning of each month, then gradually emptied as you pay for food, rent, or whatever was in the family budget. This was usually a very strict system, and once money ran out of the container, it caused problems.
All labeled. Electric.
And they all had money in it, except the one that said food. And that didn't happen to have any money. So I said to him, well, you don't need any money, you got money. He says, I can't take the money out of the other jars.
This is the classic issue with budgets. Sometimes the amount you allocate doesn't always match up with what you spend each month. During the Great Recession of 2008, there was an anomaly that flummoxed economists. Despite being in the worst financial crisis since the Great Depression, sales of premium gasoline rose, albeit slightly. The basics of economic theory doesn't support this phenomenon. The thing about economic theory is that it's full of exceptions to its own rules. 2 economists at Brown University did some research into the gasoline phenomenon. They believe they've solved it. Dustin Hoffman was buying all the premium gas. They found that the consumption of premium gasoline wasn't purely dependent on the price. There was something beyond simple supply and demand. To find the missing piece, we need to go back to Dustin Hoffman's mason jars. Budgeting with containers was on its way out the door when the Golden Girls hit television. Your grandparents might still assign dollar bills for monthly spending in the same manner they allocate their necessary medications, but that's less likely for generations with no memory of Watergate. That doesn't mean we don't budget. Most Americans still budget for and separate large expenses. Those just come in the form of retirement accounts, education plans, and if you own a home, a mortgage is just a big mason jar labeled housing expenses. You just happen to live inside.
Today we're going to interview the famous old woman who lives in a shoe. I'm sure you all know the poem, There Was an Old Woman Who Lived in a Shoe. She had so many children she didn't know what to do. Okay, well, we're just going to step up to the door here and see if she's in.
For other smaller expenses, many people forgo the physical allocations for mental ones. Think mental mason jars. Instead of physically placing dollars aside each month, you mentally account for what you're going to spend. This may simply be your inner commentary nudging you away from takeout at the end of a particularly costly month. For others, it involves a mental running tally of expenses that guides your every purchase.
We use different mental accounts all the time. From the money we plan to spend on something fun like movies and plays, to the accounts we keep for our kids' college tuition. Our minds just naturally keep things separate.
So how did the researchers account for the rise in premium gas sales? Take an example family that budgeted $200 on gas each month, starting at the beginning of 2008. Gas was expensive, to say the least, averaging $4 nationwide. Then the recession hit with full force, sending gas prices spiraling well below $2. Suddenly, $200 could buy a lot more gas than they needed. The researchers determined that since the money was already being budgeted, those consumers were going to use it and splurge, buying the more expensive high-octane premium gas. They budgeted too much for gas and were now spending it instead of reallocating the funds to different places, like college fund or cheese fries. Dustin Hoffman and those who stumbled into buying premium gasoline had the same issue. Circumstances change, and your budget should too. A budget is a living, breathing thing, neither subject to whimsy or chiseled in stone. So the next time you're filling up your mason jars with loose change or your car with gas, think, are you following your budget or is your budget following you?
I think your mom probably told you that was the
That's
way
right.
to
That's right. Or my father.
borrow money from Gentiles.
That's right. No, and don't pay them back.
I'll tell you a story about Dusty.
I know what you're going to tell. You're going to tell about the money you lent me. I know you're going to tell this fucking
Such
story.
a funny story, I think.